Well, hello, Viva Albertos. JP Hill here, along with the writing team for our latest episode of the VEB podcast. It's been a while since we've been with you, but I've been on vacation and doing some things like that, and the Cardinals have been struggling. Let's just say that, struggling. So I don't think a lot of you out there in Cardinals world were itching for content, but I can tell from the questions that we got today that you guys are ready to talk about off-season stuff and about what all of this season has meant and what's coming next. This is a Q&A episode, and we took questions over on the site, and there were 350 or so comments. And so I've gone through the questions and pared them down a little bit, and we're ready to go. And we got a good portion of the crew today. We've got Adam has joined us. Adam, say hi, Adam.
Hey JP, how you doing, man?
Doing good. How's it going?
It's going about as good as it can be for, a season where at least we kind of decently expected them to have. I mean, there wasn't a ton of expectation, at least from my end, but it is what it is. Maybe looking forward to some of the minor league playoffs, as September and we roll into October, but I'm not going to complain a ton. I'll save it for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, yeah. I know Adam and I are ready to go. We both hopped on a little bit early and we were having a heated debate. It is debate night. Heated debate about Michael Ciani and Victor Scott. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So, Blake, how's it going, man?
It's good. Like Adam, I have some bones to pick, I think, with the Cardinals, but I have been much more plugged into the minor league world than the major league world for probably the last month or so now. It's been far more entertaining.
It's been pretty interesting. The minor league season has actually proven to be a pretty entertaining topic to follow this year, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And our fearless leader, Scooter Simon, Heather, is here. Heather, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good. I guess. And maybe not for the Cardinals, but I'm doing okay. I've been having trouble with some headaches over the past month or so I haven't really been able to look at any games or anything. Wow. I can't tell if they're giving me the headache or I can't tell what the cause of it is. I think I would feel a lot better if Cardinals were playing a little bit better, but what can you do?
I think we all would. I think I'd much rather be watching a really good Cardinals team tonight than Trump and Kamala Harris having their moments. But hey, we're recording about baseball, and that makes me happy, even if the Cardinals aren't. So there was news today. We'll start with that. If you don't know, we are recording this on Tuesday night. It will publish sometime Wednesday morning. Who knows when you'll actually get around to watching it. With the way this season has gone, you might be a little later than that. But the biggest news that we've had right now is that Victor Scott is on his way back down. He probably just passed my house here because I'm right on I-55, heading back to Memphis. And Thomas Saggese is heading up. And so Blake, being our resident minor league guy, what do we need to know about Thomas Saggese?
Thomas Saggese is super interesting, and I'm really glad the Cardinals called him up. One, because he's a big name prospect for a reason, and two, because I'm fascinated to see how he's actually going to do against major league pitching. Because when you look at Saggese, he makes horrible swing decisions. He's aggressive, we'll say. He's only like kind of aggressive in the zone and then super aggressive outside the zone. Like, I think he's chasing like 30% of pitches outside, or 37% of pitches outside the zone. When it's breaking balls, it's like 45% or something like absurd like that. Like, he just loves expanding the zone, and that obviously works to his detriment at times, and that really ate him alive at the beginning of the minor league season. He has since turned the corner and gotten really hot. And he started to do some of the things that he used to do really well last year, such as like, for some reason, chasing a curveball 6 inches down and out and then clubbing it over the pole side fence for a 95-mile-per-hour home run. And that's one of the things about Saggese. He's probably about like average-ish power, like straight up raw power, but he does a really good job of pulling his fly balls. I think he's in like the 80th percentile or something like that in pulled fly ball rate amongst minor leaguers this year. And then he also does a really good job of finding the sweet spot. So he's really hitting those batted balls between like 8 and 32 degrees of launch angle, which is like the ideal spot you want to hit it in to get hits and extra base hits. So it's kind of a fascinating blend of has a really good batted ball profile, but really bad swing decisions. And I'm very intrigued to see how he does this year. I think the swing decisions can be improved, and that's going to take experience and exposure and some intentional work on that. But I think for a guy who can hit the ball as consistently well as he does, I think that is a huge tool, and that's something that can be pretty hard to improve. So I'm excited for JC, and I'm hoping to see him like kind of put things together for these 3 weeks and be really interesting. But I think he'll be a good prospect and a good major league player, or at least a good hitter going forward.
Yeah. Along those lines, I was kind of thinking about expectations, and Adam or Heather, you guys can weigh in on this too. But for me, for this period of time, however long he's up, let's presume that he's going to be up for the rest of the season. There's not much season left. I don't think that I am looking at for statistical results from him. I mean, that's just going to be hard to have those in your first exposure to major league changeups and major league sliders and sweepers, pitches he's probably not even seen this caliber of, down in the minors. So I'm not necessarily looking at the box score results, but I do want to see that his ability to translate his contact, skill into pulled balls and into hard contact. And I think if we see some hard contact, maybe not, a 90 plus, average exit velocity, but good enough, elite exit velocity numbers and consistent contact even on balls out of the zone, that it would give you a pretty good view of him going forward and something to work on in the offseason. Adam, do you have any thoughts on either JC or the transaction with Scott going down?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit before.
I was gonna say, did you hear me set you? I put it right there on that seat for you, ready to go.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, in terms of, I'm not really sure really what's going on. Victor Scott has been having success, and then they had, Siani got healthy, and then they decided to plug him in center field, regardless of, Victor Scott being an actual prospect with, some severance of upside. But I'm pretty, Blake pretty much nailed it in terms of Sid JC. He's someone who isn't going to hit the ball super hard, but it doesn't exactly need to, as long as he's pulling the ball and really hooking that power to the left side of the field, right? So I mean, he is hitting it within launch angle, like he mentioned, within 8 and 32 degrees. He's sweet spotted the ball. Doesn't make the best swing decisions at all, because for a 53% swing rate, he's got like a 68% zone swing, which you probably want maybe a 20 to or 22% or above offset between the two. And he's chasing at a near 40% clip. So, especially for someone who's maybe, like, despite the statistical success that he had last year while he was in Double-A, and then since July 1st of this season, he's probably someone who I would have liked to see maybe still stay in the minor leagues. I'm just someone who doesn't like to start the clock for no reason at all, unless, you see the guy who is like for sure ready. And, I feel like to kind of start the clock on a guy when the season, just isn't, it's at the crapshoot point that it is right now. There's still a lot of opportunities for him to improve his swing decisions for over the next month. And he's probably a guy who's not going to be major league ready, at least in my opinion, until probably next year, like probably pretty early on, because he's already pretty good. But, the discipline numbers could use a little bit of, or are definitely a work in progress. And, every major leaguer is going to have some sort of caveat, regardless of how good they are coming into the major leagues. But he's probably someone who I would have liked to see stay in the minor leagues throughout the rest of the season, and then probably start next year, kind of see what the clock would be. I mean, I'm sure they're probably going to keep him at AAA to start next year, and then maybe at some point in May to kind of still manipulate a service time or toy with that to try to get around 7 years out of him. So long story short, I feel like someone probably should have stayed in AAA, still got stuff to work on. Would love to see him try to hit the ball harder, try to cook some more of that raw power, hit more balls into 108, maybe 19, 110, or even higher, maybe improve his record in terms of hard hit balls mile per hour. But at least right now, it's probably not a move that I would have made, but here we are, and I hope for the best for him down the stretch.
Yeah, I think as somewhat of a rebuttal to that, he was Rule 5 eligible this offseason, so the Cardinals would have had to add him to the 40-man. Granted, they've done it now like 3 months sooner than they had to, and I don't know if that would. Does him being added now, that doesn't take away an option for next year, does it? Like he'll still have 3 options when he starts.
No, he burns an option.
He burned one.
Yeah,
he burned an option this year. So,
Yeah.
so that's the downside of that. But I will say, like, there are flaws with him. But I think with the Cardinals being where they're at, over like with how many games are left this season, I would rather see them like go ahead and just burn the option year with the guy who's close to the majors and actually give him the exposure, because I think there's something to be said for a guy who's super aggressive to come up and be super aggressive against major league hitters or major league pitching, and then realize that he can't keep doing that if he wants to have success.
Find
and I
out.
think in like 3 weeks of seeing major league pitching could actually be huge for him adjusting in the offseason.
Yeah,
That's a good
that's
point.
kind of the same way I am. Is that I kind of want him to see what's not going to work. because some of his game is not going to work. Find that out, and then you got all off season to work on things to improve, to know what you need to change. And I kind of agree with you a little bit on one of the points you made, Adam. Like, it wouldn't surprise me, even though he is Rule 5 eligible and they had to add him to the roster and stuff like that. It wouldn't surprise me if he didn't necessarily was a shoe-in to make the team, next year. Like, I could see him floating back and forth a little bit, and certainly not handed a starting position unless there's some sort of injury. So I don't really feel like that this is the end of his minor league development, but it's a good chance for him to know what he's going to have to work on to be successful in the majors. Heather, let's turn to you. So talking about this, Scott and Siani plays into this, and Sajasi's coming up. And I'm just going to kind of ask you a general question, just to kind of bring everyone back around to what I feel like needs to be our opening topic. And there's probably a question about this, and so we might bring it out here in a minute. But we're talking about Scott going down, Siani playing, Sajasi up. What in your opinion is the best use of these final 3 weeks of the season?
Well, it kind of brings me to rosters expanded the beginning of September, right?
Yeah, I think they added two extra slots.
So doesn't it just seem strange to me? I don't know that they would send down Victor Scott for. I'm not going to try to pronounce it right now. My brain is not working very well.
We had to run through it beforehand. It is. We have confirmed it is Sajasi. Yes.
Sajasi. I got to it and I panicked, and even though we've said it a million times, and so I'm like, so it just seems kind of weird to make that move with expanded rosters. Like, why didn't they just bring him up as part of the expanded rosters if they wanted him up? That seems weird because what I think these last few months, because as much as I would like to say that they have a shot to make the playoffs, I don't even know if mathematically they do anymore. I haven't checked it in a minute, but it seems very unlikely, to put it mildly. So I think these last few games should be used to see what they have, what they can use, what's going to work going into next season. Maybe give some younger players some experience. If there's a player that they want to do right by and call them up, do it now. I don't know. those kind of moves. I mean, I always like to hear about that. That always seems like a nice thing to do. So I think that's what this should be for. I don't want them to tank the games or anything like that. But now's the time to let the kids play, I think.
So that goes to what Adam and I were debating before we went live. It's Scott goes down, Siani's playing pretty much every day. Would you rather those last 3 weeks go to someone like Victor Scott, a developing speed prospect, good fielder, or to Michael Siani, who, well, let's just say he plays defense really well. So I mean, but one of those players is an up and coming prospect who I think maybe might have a future as a starter. I'm still pretty undecided. Another one is probably at best a platoon player who's essentially glove only. So I'll throw it out to you guys. Adam, Blake, whoever wants to jump in here. Siani, Scott, who should be playing every day? Did they make a mistake? What are they doing? Explain it to me.
Adam, I feel like you need to kick us off here.
Yeah, no. So I mean, I hesitate to call it a debate, JP, because I agree with you. I'm just playing devil's advocate and trying to get into the brains of Mozeliak in the front office and some of the analysts and the team to kind of see why, Siani was kind of getting all the reps this year is to end the season. So, if it were up to me, if it were up to all of us, we would probably all have Victor Scott. And I agree for all the reasons why he should be up. Kareem was talking about it on Twitter. He was upset, and I agree with him 100%. But to play devil's advocate, and everybody else can make the argument about Scott because we all know why he should be up there. But to make the other argument, I can see kind of why they would like to have a guy like Michael Siani playing, because we kind of know that Victor Scott, at least right now, his outcome is likely that he's going to be a fourth outfielder. He's probably not a starting caliber outfielder on a championship caliber team, but also neither is Michael Siani. But if you're going to make the case for Victor Scott, you have to be absolutely sure that glove is going to be 70, 80 grade. Or in other words, around 77, 78 percentile or 99.9 percentile, league average, above like percentile defense and center field, right? If you're going to be a 70 or an 80, we know that Siani is a platinum caliber defensive player already. Victor Scott is a really, really good defensive player, but do we know that he's going to be an 80 grade center fielder like Michael Siani is, or like Jacob Young? Those two are pretty much up there, like at the top. If it wasn't for Siani getting hurt, he probably would be getting a platinum glove. I don't think so. We don't know that, right? He could be, but it's very, very, very difficult to make that assertion when we already know Michael Siani is a platinum glove center fielder. We both know neither one of them are going to be great hitters. We know Siani is probably a 70 WRC plus guy, and this is rookie season, right? He probably could be an 80 or 90 when he reaches, at full maturity over the first 6 years of his team control. Victor Scott the second is probably around that right now. Could be a little bit better, but I feel in their minds that maybe 10 WRC plus difference between 80 and 90 isn't worth trying to see isn't worth gauging what kind of defensive player Victor Scott II would be when we already know Michael Siani is a platinum glove caliber center fielder. So I can kind of see what they're thinking about in their heads, but even then, I would say, you know what, we know Siani's probably like a 30 power guy. Victor Scott probably might also be that player. He might also just got on a quick hot streak. Maybe the batting stance change doesn't mean a whole lot, but I can kind of see where they're coming from playing Siani every day and wanting to kind of roll with him because they both have the same number of team control, basically. But they're both not the greatest hitters, but we know for sure Siani is an 80 grade center fielder. Victor Scott could be, but we don't know that for sure. And I feel like you've already got that solidified with Michael Siani.
Do we know that for sure? Like here's my pushback on that a little bit. Like, obviously Siani is a good fielder. We knew that going into the season. Like, that's not a surprise to any of us who have somewhat followed the minor leagues. We all knew that Siani's skill was playing center field. But his 706 innings, I looked it up, 706 innings enough for with the variability that we see with defensive stats, not necessarily defensive ability, but defensive stats, for us to say that Michael Siani is without a doubt 80 grade platinum glove center fielder every year. Because my argument is, if his offense is always going to be pretty much terrible, then he always has to be a platinum glove winner in order to be worth the 1.5 to 2 WAR that he is right now at about 400 plate appearances, right? So you are talking about a player that has to be the best fielder in the game in order for him to be a viable, even heavy platoon candidate. And that's where I get caught up a little bit, because to me, Siani definitely should be on the team, and Siani has a role, and he's going to start a lot of games. He's going to play a lot of fielding, but I'm not ready to commit to anything about Michael Siani other than that his glove was really good over a relatively small sample size in one season.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on this one, Jason, because we pretty much we know what Siani is at this point.
Yeah.
He's basically a platinum.
I hate to say he's the finished product at age 24, but he is. I mean,
he probably is. And right now, I think he's on pace for like 2.5 WAR. So, sure, that's fine. I mean, if you want, if he can play elite platinum glove caliber defense every year and sit right in that 2 to 2.5 WAR, do you maybe want better production out of the position? Sure, but it's a viable starter. But I just don't think the bat is going to get any better. And frankly, you can see it in the way pitchers pitch to him. You can literally look at it. They'll just attack him down the middle all game and know he's not going to hit it. I mean, literally looking at the numbers right now, the league average, zone rate for a pitcher is 48.7%. For Victor Scott, it's like 50%. So they're a little more aggressive with Victor Scott because he's not that good of a hitter. For Michael Siani, it's like 56, 57%. All they do is just throw fastballs over the plate, and he's still a 70 WRC plus hitter. There's just not a whole lot of offensive potential there. Whereas I think Victor Scott has, he's not where Siani is defensively, but he could be. And I think that's the key there, is that he could be Siani defensively, but he also has he's better than the 70 WRC plus hitter since he's come back up to the majors. And he has the potential to be maybe borderline league average, which if you're a good defensive center fielder, that's probably more than 2.5 WAR. Yeah. So I would rather see, if we know what Siani is and we don't know what Scott is yet, I'd rather give Scott the extra 3 weeks to really learn how to improve his defensive reads in center field and how to maybe build on some of the success he's seen offensively since he's come back to the majors, as opposed to just sending him back down to AAA and letting Siani continue to be Siani.
Yeah. Just to drive your point home, because this was my process of making this decision over the course of 2 or 3 months before Siani's injury. Because probably before his injury, I kept looking at his minor league stats and I was like, you know what? He's gonna walk. Like if he could just hold on, then he's gonna walk, and we see the defense. But then as I started looking, as you said, the strike rate, he's not going to walk. His walk rate at St. Louis this year, 4.3%. In AAA last year, 17.9. Why is there such a huge difference? Well, it's not because he stopped learning how to walk. It's that they don't throw him pitches out of the strike zone. They're not afraid of him. You can't draw walks if everything you get are strikes in the zone. And that's where it kind of convinced me. Is like, no, the things that he even did well in the minor leagues, he's not going to be able to do them offensively because there's no fear in his bat. And the glove is there. I'm not talking about cutting him, but I'm also not talking about starting him every day, either for the rest of this season or next year.
Which I think is a fair point, because I also don't really want to start Victor Scott every day next year either.
Yeah, right.
Unless the Cardinals commit to being a team in transition and they're not really playoffs, and then sure, like why not run Victor Scott out there and see what he can do?
Exactly.
But if they're actually going to do what the Cardinals do every year and win like 88 to 92 games and make the playoffs, I don't think you're going to probably do that with either Siani or Scott as your starting center.
Yeah. All right, that's 20 good minutes of debate. We got some lively discussion today. We've got Adam playing the role of devil's advocate. I mean, we're really cooking on all cylinders here. Let's get to your questions, because we got a lot of questions, and I think I was able to pare them down to the ones that I think are sort of representative of others. So if you asked a question, we're probably going to answer it, but it might not be the one that you asked, and I'll apologize for that. But with that many comments, it's too many questions for us to get to tonight. But we are going to try to hit pretty much all the topics that you guys over there on the site wanted to talk to. And so with that in mind, we're going to start with London Bird, who had, I believe, 3 great questions for us. And I think that one of them is where we need to start tonight. Everyone is talking about what's going to happen at the end of the season, what's going to happen in the front office, what's going to happen with Ollie, what's going to happen with the coaches. And we kind of saw the first sort of domino fall. one commenter on my post: if one domino falls, they all falls. Well, that's a good point. But Gary LaRocque is out, and I don't know if Blake or Adam or Heather, if any of you guys want to talk about LaRocque, you're free to. But in light of that, we know there's going to be some change. How much more is it going to go? So London Bert's question 1A from him: please rank the likelihood of the following still having their job on opening day next year. And I'll give you a little bit of heads up. We'll go with Heather to start with. So Heather, you can jump in here first. Rank the likelihood of the following still having their job on opening day next year: Moshe Locke, president of baseball operations; Ollie Marmol, manager. This says, now it's making me question because it says Taylor Ward. That's not right, is it?
No, Taylor Ward is an Angel.
Yeah,
Angel.
Right. Yes, Ward. Because now it's like what you were saying with the JC. Like, what is it? I'm gonna have to.
It's Turner, right? I think it's Turner.
It's Turner. Yeah,
Turner.
Taylor
Yes.
Ward is.
I was like, wait a second. It's not. I know it's not Taylor. I know who it is, but what is it? And then Dusty Blake. So, Heather, you can either rank those or not, or you could just say who you feel like will survive and who won't survive. So jump in there and take a shot at it.
I forgot I had myself muted, but I was frantically Googling Taylor Ward because I'm like, who the heck is that?
London Bird, you threw me off, man. You got me.
That means nothing to me. Oh, okay. I'm glad I wasn't losing it completely.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have Mo, Ollie, Turner Ward, and Dusty Blake. Let's see. Maybe I won't rank them because let's see. So I think, well, no, I will. I'll rank them. Likelihood of the following to still have their job. So most likely to still have a job to least. Let's do Mo, most likely. I think he's on his way out, but they're not going to fire him before he retires, which I think he has one more year. is planning.
Yeah.
So
does
I
Ollie.
think, and yeah, I think it goes Mo, Ollie, those two, likely, but Mo, then Ollie. Like, and Mo is the president of baseball operations. So if they wanted to like fire someone, they could fire um Gersh.
Gersh, yeah,
What's
yeah.
the
GM, General
GM's
Manager
name?
Michael Gersh. Yes.
They could fire Gersh. And then let's see. Dusty Blake's pitching coach. The pitching wasn't. I mean, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. I think that was a nice little surprise. It wasn't like great or anything, but considering what they had, I think it turned out about as good as I could have hoped. So I think it goes Dusty Blake and then Taylor Ward because the offense was pretty disappointing considering who they had. I think all of those people are pretty safe, but if they did want to shake it up, I could see it being the hitting coach. That's what I got.
Around the circle,
and then
go ahead.
Should if just that part, just
that
likely?
part for now. Yeah.
I say because I'm like I don't have anyone for the second one. So
Yeah,
someone else
I
say
don't really
something
either.
smart and I'll agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who's in the market for a hitting coach. Matt Holliday. No.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, do you guys have a different order, a different take?
Yeah.
I feel like. Oh, go ahead, Blake.
I'll actually throw out a different take that's only slightly different. I think it's still Mo is most likely to have his job. But instead of going with Ollie next, I'll actually go with Dusty Blake because I think Mo has liked the way that like I remember asking him a question at Blogger Day and Mo like cited Dusty Blake as like almost one of the driving forces towards throwing fewer fastballs. And you can kind of see the effect he's had on some pitchers, like improving their sliders. And I think there have been some positive effects that Dusty Blake has had. And I think the front office leans on him to kind of be a driving force and maybe modernizing the pitching development a little bit. So I could see a world in which Ollie Marmol, coming off of 2 non-playoff seasons, could potentially get fired. And then potentially the hitting coach as well. I would rank Turner Ward last as well. And I could see those two getting fired and Dusty Blake staying. So I'll go with Dusty Blake as right below Mo as in terms of job security.
Yeah, and I feel like go with my end, I feel like Mozeliak, I mean, they've confirmed already, at least publicly, that, or like the most publicly, that Mozeliak will be staying throughout the rest of his contract through 2025 and then probably will be out the door then. So I feel like we can, firmly say that his job is safe through the rest of this year and all of next year, unless something drastic happens. After that, I feel like it definitely gets a little interesting. I would say that I feel like Dusty Blake is probably safer, kind of like how Blake said, just because he's been able to do a lot. We didn't expect this pitching staff to do a whole lot. I mean, they did sign, Sonny Gray this season, but after Sonny Gray, they didn't really do their due diligence in picking up a number 2 or, really even a number 3. You've got a bunch of 4s out there with, Steven Matz, Miles Michaelis. You've got, who was it? Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, who's not even pitching right now because he's injured. So he's done a lot with very little, and he's played the cards that he's had, and he's done pretty decently with that. I feel like the lineup, we expected a lot more from the lineup. We expected more from Jordan Walker, We expected a lot more from Lars Nootbaar, a lot more from Paul Goldschmidt, a lot more from Nolan Arenado, who is, the last 2 guys are definitely on the decline, but I feel like the offense really, really underperformed this season. And I would argue because of that Turner Ward is probably a little bit more on the outside looking in than a guy like Dusty Blake would. And I feel like finally I didn't really rank them, but I'm just giving my analysis. But regarding Marmol, I know that he's got 1 more year. And I know Jeff mentioned earlier this year because they didn't want him to be a lame duck going into next season because it was, or at least throughout the rest of the year, knowing that, he's on a 1-year contract, or he's got 1 more year left on his deal, at least at the time or earlier this year. And they didn't want him being a lame duck and how that would look poorly. But having, re-signing the manager for the next year hasn't meant in the past that they would keep the manager for the next season. It has meant that they would get fired. So I could definitely see Ollie within the next, few months in off season, potentially losing his job. If I had to assume, I think he stays, because it's been a large turning of the guard and manager since Tony La Russa left almost over a decade ago. So I feel like they might try to keep him on one more year, maybe make a change within the coaching staff, especially like we mentioned with a guy like Turner Ward. But I feel like especially once 2026, once we get a new head honcho and it's not going to be John Mozeliak, I feel like that's when we're going to really see a big overturn in not just the front office, but the coaching staff and maybe even the roster. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming at it from too, is that you've got Mozeliak's under contract through 2025. Gersh is under contract through 2025. I wasn't able to confirm this, but I'm almost certain that Gersh and Flores got the same contract. Maybe not the same value, but basically the same deal, which puts him on 2025. Ollie's through 2025. That's your brain trust, your circle there of guys that are all essentially on a 1-year deal starting with this season. And I don't see why they would, as much as I could argue that they should, maybe, although I don't really have a huge problem with them. They could pin everything on Ollie, make him the scapegoat, hire a new manager, and then next year anyway, there's going to be a new president of baseball operations and maybe a new general manager who will probably want to bring their own manager in, and then you'd be talking about another transition. And I just don't see the Cardinals doing that. Personally, I don't see there's any way that Turner Ward keeps his job this season. And I don't see that there's any way that Dusty Blake loses his. I just really don't. You have to really search down the Cardinals roster to find a pitcher who I wouldn't say, underperformed. That's not really what I mean, but that the Cardinals didn't in some way execute the right game plan with. You look at Palante. Palante, maybe he learned his new pitches, off at other places, but the Cardinals still deployed him the right way. Same with Libertor, same with some of these other guys. They either the roster and the front office and everyone started listening to Blake, or Blake and them were able to change the philosophy or the organization. And speaking of I say Blake, I meant Dusty Blake, not our Blake, even though our Blake has been basically documenting this all season long through spring training and before. So it like you, it seems to me like the Cardinals that the pitching, even though it hasn't been great, there's no reason for him to exit at this point.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Lundenberg, for the question. We will try to circle around to at least one or two more, but I want to go down to a question asked by THP 0344, who asked this same question. He said he thought he remembered asking it at the beginning of the season. He did. I remember it. And I remember us talking about it. And so I'm going to circle back to it again, and we'll talk about it again. He says this. So the Cardinals win. This is the theoretical, but it's proving to be true. The Cardinals win 85 games and don't make the playoffs. Now what? Do you keep the same strategy? Do you change it? Fire the front office? Fire the manager? Push hard for 2025? Sell hard for 2025? It looks like that's going to prove true. 85 wins might actually be, ambitious for this club at this point. So what do you guys want to do? Are we going for it in 2025? Should we have a rebuilding year? How would you approach the offseason? And we'll open it up to Blake since I mentioned him last.
So I think like what we've talked about in the last question of pretty much everybody's contract expires at the end of 2025. I have a hard time believing that the Cardinals are going to give out big contracts in free agency or to any player and then have a new GM come in and inherit all of those contracts. So if I'm the Cardinals, like they're probably going to do the same thing they do every year. And like I wouldn't imagine, like maybe they pick up Kyle Gibson's option. Maybe they sign another pitcher like a 1+1 and maximize their flexibility going forward. Personally, if that's going to be the strategy, I would like to see them just kind of take a transition year and play some of the prospects. See if you can get like Michael McGreevy to give you Kyle Gibson production at like $500,000 instead of $12 million. And really kind of see what you have with some of these upper level guys going into 2026 with a new brain trust in order. Not necessarily punting on the season. I think you could maybe make some like smaller acquisitions here and there and plug some gaps, but I would not be a huge fan of like bringing back Kyle Gibson, bringing back Paul Goldschmidt for another year and just running it back, because I don't think that is going to be a playoff team probably. And I also don't think that is going to give the Cardinals the chance to actually see and develop some of the prospects at the major league level that they probably need to see and develop.
Heather, Do you agree, disagree? How concerned are you about the ticket sales in light of a mediocre rebuild?
So I'm going to approach this question a little from a little bit different angle in that I don't know what the Cardinals will do. I've kind of been drafting like a post about this for a while. And personally, selfishly, I am so bored with this team. I have such a hard time even watching them play because they are so boring to me. And normally, like, boring is fine when they're winning and they're consistent. It's not fine when we go through these stretches of just, not winning and the, not putting stringing together wins. It's not enjoyable for me to watch. And maybe I sound like a fair weather fan, but in a sense, like, I like the team. I want to watch them, and I just fall asleep trying to watch baseball. So it's boring, and it's because of some of the decisions I think they've made. There's not really even Jordan Walker should be exciting. That should be an exciting player, and the way that they have handled him has not made me excited. Uh, it's made the way that he's they brought him down and probably brought him up too soon, even though I was excited about that because I really wanted to see him. But I'm a fan. Like you got to give the kids their vegetables. Can't give me candy before I have my vegetables. Come on, that's not my fault. But so yeah, I'm just so bored with this team that it kind of says the question is what is it? Hold on, I lost the question. Where is it? What do you do? What do you do next? Yeah.
Yeah,
Now what?
yeah. Now what?
Basically, now what?
Now
Do
what?
you
Yeah.
change the strategy or keep it the same? So I'm approaching it as asking me. You got to change it because I can't watch this anymore. I'm so bored. And based on ticket sales and everything, everyone else is kind of bored too. I haven't really been to a game all season because why would I be bored at the game?
Yeah.
So I haven't really offered any plans. I've just been complaining. Um, I would like either them to get some youth, like just some young players in there that are um, like something I can look forward to in the future, or go get someone cool. Go spend some money and get someone big. Something where I'm like, you know what? Even if when I was looking at the Reds for the very small preview I wrote today,
Mm-hmm.
not a great team, but they have a player that is stealing 62 bases. I want that. I want that.
Yeah.
So good.
If
Some
we're not going to be
dynamic
good, can we at
pitchers
least
too. Like
steal 62 bases? That's
they're an
cool.
interesting roster, the Reds. They're,
Great
yeah.
farm system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd rather watch the Reds, even though we're a better team. Yeah. So Adam, do you have a different take, or are you basically same as these?
I'm on the same boat, but I guess just I'll offer an extra point just to kind of hop off of what Blake and Heather have already mentioned. I feel like, I mean, we do know that well, actually, first, the Cardinals had bases loaded in the bottom of the ninth with 0 outs and didn't score a single run. They lost the game because 3 strikeouts in a row. But that's just the kind of the memo of the season. Yeah.
That's 2024
yes,
right there. That's
2024. Yeah, 2024 in a nutshell in one game. But 85 games or 85 wins is kind of that medium zone that we've talked about all season long, and I mentioned before, where it's just like you're not really contending. Maybe you kind of are, but it's not secure enough to the point where you can say, okay, we're definitely going to be in the playoffs with 85 wins. You're kind of taking a risk, and it's more so if you're kind of teeter-tottering in the middle and you're not on the ascension, which we know the Cardinals for sure are not on the ascension given the roster they have right now and the prospects that they have because they don't have a great system. You might as well retool with what they have. And I feel like they're not going to be doing that. Maybe next year, I feel like they're probably going to be playing middle ground again. I agree with Blake that they're definitely not going to be making a big addition to the roster, especially when we've already heard Bill DeWitt mention that they're not going to increase payroll, right? And we've also heard that from John Mozeliak. We hear them, kind of rattling the tin can for money from the taxpayers, and they want to build whatever XYZ things like for the stadium, $500 million that they're asking from. So given that's the situation that they're in financial strength, like they're strained financially, I don't think we're going to see a payroll increase. I think they're going to be slashing payroll, if anything, especially with some of these big contracts coming off the books. I don't see them, potentially replenishing that production with a free agent like this year. So, I don't think they're going to be in the play for any big free agents this year. And unfortunately, if, what I would do, they're not going to fire the front office guys just yet. They're going to let those contracts play out. I don't think I see Ollie Marmol we talked about earlier. I don't think I'm seeing how they're probably going to be doing the same thing where they probably pick up an option for Kyle Gibson. Maybe Lance Lynn gets his option picked up. Maybe they make another, like a slight addition to the rotation. But I don't think they're going to be selling either. They're just going to be playing neutral. And I feel like if we're going to see a big sell-off, it's going to happen next year, a la 2023, where they sold Jordan Montgomery and got Thomas Ajayci and Takeo Roby, and they kind of, they shed the roster there and they put up the for sale sign. I wish it would have happened this year. I know it's another question that we have on here, not to get into it, but I for sure see it next year if it happens again. And I really wish it kind of would have happened this year, but I can also see why they didn't. We'll get into that later.
Yeah. My thing is I agree with all of you guys. Like I don't expect a whole lot of payroll expenditures. I expect the team to largely be what it is, and I think they're going to try to hope to win 83 to 85 games and sneak into the playoffs again next year. I think that's what they're looking at. The pushback that I would have against them about that is that they're also going to have to roll out some kind of new TV system, right? And they're going to have to convince us to buy into this thing, whatever it is. So not only do they need to get ticket sales to recoup their lost income this year, but they're going to have to get ticket or TV subscriptions to recoup a lot of what they're going to lose just in their cable contracts. Probably just going to end. That's going to be the end of it, right? And so, in my opinion, if I've got to sell a product that I want you to buy, I've got to sell a product. I've got to have something to sell, and it's going to be really, really hard for them to sell the St. Louis area public on Jordan Walker and Nolan Arenado and Sonny Gray. And I mean, some of their good players, Wilson Contreras and others. I mean, they just don't have that dynamic thing that you can say, this is a reason to come to the ballpark, besides like Mason Wynn. And so, in my mind, they should be aggressive. They should be aggressive and try to sell the product that they're trying to, get people to buy. But based on the Cardinals' history, I don't see that happening. And I also, don't feel like that the talent is out there or the money is there or the roster openings are there for them to be able to do that. They could maybe make one move at first base or one move in center field. But from what I've seen in center, there's not really that many great options anyway. So it's going to be tough. And I just kind of think the Cardinals might be in a bit of a hole. And so let's hope we get one playoff season out of it before things really change. All right. So what I want to do now, I'm gonna kind of go wild card on this one. We've got 15, 20 minutes left. I got several sort of assigned questions that I want everyone to get to, but I want to cover at least one more of these questions here in our general section. And so this one is from Legante 11. I'm not really sure how you say his name. That's how I'm choosing it to say it. So I apologize if I got it wrong. And so I'm going to open this up to whichever two of you want to talk about it. It's a very simple question. Would you have sold at the deadline? Now, I'm going to interpret it this way. You can't say retrospectively. You can't say, well, in light of what we know now, I would have sold. Everyone would say that. But rolling back to where we were at the deadline, were you in favor of selling then or not?
I'm going to say,
Adam, I think you might have been. I think you might have been the only one of us that was in favor of it.
Of selling?
I think maybe.
Yeah, so I'll go both ways here. So I'm gonna say, like, if it were up to me, like I said, even then, at July 30th, July 31st, I would have sold. And the reason why is because if we saw the market for relievers, we saw Tanner Scott get dealt from the Marlins to the Orioles, and the Marlins got an absolute haul for for Tanner Scott. We saw a ton of relievers get traded at the deadline for fringe top 100 prospects or actual top 100 prospects. So if they could have gotten that for Ryan Helsley, who has a year and a half of team control left and is arguably the best closer, or one of the best closers in baseball, you got Emmanuel Clase, but he is an elite reliever. And the Cardinals have a below average at best, maybe average farm system. And if, given the situation right now where we know they're not contending, there's no reason to, at least in my opinion at the time, to keep a guy like Ryan Helsley if they kind of were not in the realm of success, because we saw that run differential. We saw the different kinds of signs that dictated they're probably not going to be a contending team, at least from my evidence that I would have, the argument that I would have made. I probably would have sold just simply because of the way that you could replenish the farm system. And I think it was Jacob Cardinals Reek who mentioned that, and I think he nailed it. Because they didn't do something like that, it kind of sets the team back maybe a year or two, just simply because it screws with the player development and that kind of timeline, moving players forward from the farm system. Maybe they could have traded and gotten a guy. Maybe it was the Cardinals who could have gotten Connor Norby from the Orioles and get a second, a nice second baseman piece or other prospects to put in their farm system for the future. But you could also go on the flip side and make the same argument that they could have very easily, BS or like magic, like devil magic their way into the playoffs with like a negative 40 run differential. And let's say Eric Fetty does have success. It could have very easily gone the other way because Fetty's been great all season. If he were actually, maybe he's been struggling a little bit as a Cardinal, but let's see, he hit the ground running at Busch Stadium and he was pitching great. Let's say that devil magic works out. It could have very easily gone that way as well. And if that was the case, we wouldn't have been having this discussion. That being said, it is interesting, like that's also just a devil's advocate argument. And regardless, I probably would have also sold, but I could also see at the time, okay, you know what, despite the run differential, despite, the peripherals on paper, they still are technically in the hunt, just a couple games behind. I think it was either the Mets or the Braves at the third wildcard spot at that time. So I could see them trying to shoot for it. It just didn't work out. And I feel like the opposite could have very easily happened, where they could have read the devil magic that they had in years past, and just played in the luck game, could have snuck into the playoffs and we wouldn't be having this discussion. But even then, I probably would have sold just simply because of the way they could have replenished the farm system with guys like Ryan Helsley, with maybe an Andrew Kittredge or, any other players that, are elite players who have a year, maybe two of team control or less than that. And they could have really replenished the farm system, but it didn't work out that way. But I see both ways.
Yeah, I can't really say anything because I was definitely in favor of buying. And in fact, I kind of argued that they should have done. I actually expected them to do a little less than they did, but Fetty was on my radar as the guy that I thought would be the most ideal pickup for him. So I don't have a leg to stand on if I was to say that they should have sold, because I have words written that you read. So yeah. All right. So let's go to our rapid fire round, and we're just going to hit everybody. I've got questions for everybody, including myself. Might not get to all of them, but we'll start with Blake. We'll start with you. The one that interests me the most is the one I'm going to get to. From Nick Kramer: why doesn't Koperniak deserve consideration for the 2025 outfield? Is he a poor fielder? Tell me about Koperniak, please.
I think Koperniak's problem is that he's a 26-year-old in AAA. And now, to be fair, he could overcome that with strong results, but it's a double whammy because he's also left-handed. You look at Victor Scott, Michael Ciani, Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar. The Cardinals have a million left-handed hitting outfielders who are ahead of him on any presumptive depth chart and who are all controllable. Koperniak's just having a hard time breaking into that group. And I mean, it's to the point where it's kind of out of his control. And he's probably not going to break into that group. Now, if the Cardinals decide that they do want to go with like a transition year next year, there's a chance in which he's like an injury or two away from actually getting into the 2025 outfield. It just kind of depends on what the Cardinals want to do, but I don't think Koperniak is going to have an easy time getting himself into the picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually if a guy's 26 and is just now kind of making their presence felt at AAA, they're not going to be a major league star, but it happens. Okay. Down to Heather. Heather, I've got two for you, but I'm gonna give you the one on Goldie first. So this is from Double Hot Dog, which sounds pretty good, by the way. Let's suppose that Goldie is not a Cardinal in 2025. Let's further suppose, that's two supposes in one question, that he is elected to the Hall of Fame at some point during his eligibility period, which he should be, I think, unless he can't recover from this season. What team uniform does Goldie wear? Is there any chance that he goes into the Hall of Fame as a Cardinal?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think he'll probably either do the Diamondbacks or he'll do a blank cap. He strikes me as a generic cap kind of guy if he goes to a different team. That just seems like his style. But if anything, I think he's got a majority of his value in Arizona. So that's what I think he's going to pick.
He got the MVP.
That's what I would pick for him if I were picking.
He got the MVP here for him, and I thought maybe a couple good playoff runs might secure it as a Cardinal.
Yeah,
but that hasn't happened. So
I would.
Yeah, right. Let's go up to Adam, and then I'll come and ask myself a question. Oh, which one do I want to give you? We've already kind of hammered on the Scott Ciani thing, so I'll go with the second question. Adam, District of Cardinals asks, within the organization, who is one impact player that is yet to debut that could be called up either before the end of the year or to start next year? Now, I will make a little note here that I read this question and handed this one off to you before Sajasi was called up. So if he might have been your option or your choice, feel free to include him, even though his debut was tonight.
Yeah, so I won't use the JC. I think definitely not this year. Or, I mean, it could be we could be surprised, but I think next year, pretty early on, I think we're going to see Quinn Matthews as a Cardinal. The way he's been pitching. I mean, right now he has hit a road bump at AAA, but he also hit a road bump early on in Springfield, and he managed to turn that around pretty quickly. Right, he adjusted very well. He's still missing bats at an elite rate. I think it's like a 32, 33% strikeout rate right now. He is really struggling in terms of control and command right now, where he's allowing a lot of walks and a lot of decent amount of home runs right now compared to what he was earlier this year at previous levels. But I could definitely see him hopping on probably going back to Memphis out of spring training next year for a few starts, really kicking ass, and then probably making the major league roster early on next year, probably early May, mid-May. But I don't think it would probably be something straight out of the box out of spring training, unless he pitches very, very well and they feel comfortable starting the clock to start the season. But I think Quinn Matthews is definitely someone we're going to be seeing very early on next year, unless something drastic happens. He's going to make that adjustment over the offseason, pitch very well in spring training, hopefully, and then prove it at least a little bit for 30, 40 or plus innings in Memphis, and then we're going to see him in St. Louis pretty early on next season. Is my prediction.
Yeah. Just a little note here on Matthews, and Blake, I'm sure you'll have a chance to talk to him with some of your questions anyway. But Matthews has had 4 levels this season, and so I mean, you're right on him. He's hit a little bit of a bump in AAA, having climbed 4 levels. It's an amazing season from Matthews comic win this year. So yeah, he is probably everyone's answer to that question. So I'll give myself a question now. Which one do I want to go with? There was a lot of questions about Goldie and a Goldie contract, so I'll take this one. Several questions. The one I chose was Apostle 87, and he asked, "What's your personal puke point for a Goldie contract to bring him back in 2025 and/or an option for 2026?" So a little point about this one is that if the Cardinals extend Goldie, then there's a limitation on how far they can go on his contract. Like it has to be, I don't know, I'm making this number up. I was never able to confirm through Jeff Jones or others what the actual percentage is, but it's something like 75 or 80% of last year's contract. They have to reach that value. And so my personal expectation would be if the Cardinals do bring him back, that they will let him go to free agency and then re-sign him. And puke point's probably not where I would go with this one, but I would expect a 1-year, $15 to $18 million deal is kind of what I would be thinking for Goldie. And I'm not sure that I would do that, but I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it because I think that his demise has been not greatly exaggerated, but at least somewhat exaggerated. So that's my take on Goldie. Back up to Blake. We'll have plenty of time to talk about Rule 5 later on, so I'm going to go with this one for now. From No Schmidt, says, grade the team's minor league system this year, and then secondly, here you go. How excited should we be about Matthews' comic win?
All right, I'll start with
Which
the
is, by
grade.
the way, what I've decided. No one else has ever done this. It's what I've decided I'm going to call him is Matthews Comic Quinn.
It's a very Kyle Reese way of saying his name.
Is it really? That's probably where I
I
got it
feel like.
from.
I don't think he says that exactly, but I feel like if he were to have a nickname for him, he would do that.
Okay, this will be the first time that Kyle's ever stolen content from me. If you ever hear him do it, then you know that I had it first for the first time ever. So, Blake.
So I'll say my grade for the system was probably a B minus. I think it's not the strongest system overall, um, which is bringing the grade down a little bit. I think it kind of lacks some upper level strength, especially since guys like Tank Henson, Dakota Roby have gotten injured this year. And like I was really hoping to see Tank in AAA for half the season. He
Yeah.
pitched really well, started to, pitch in longer outings and then got hurt and that derailed him a little bit. Dakota Roby basically a lost season 2 for him. Victor Scott obviously didn't have the best of years, although he was up in the majors, and showing some progress. So like it's a little bit of a mixed bag at the top level. I think what really brings the grade up is the strength of the system at the lower level, and at the lowest level specifically. I think there's a number of really good prospects in Palm Beach that are going to make the system look pretty solid within like a year or two. So I think a B minus is probably a fair grade, somewhere like right around average, with the bottom of the system being more exciting than the top. And then for the Quinn Matthews part of this question, we should be incredibly excited about Quinn Matthews, because I cannot recall the last time I saw a pitcher have the level of success that he has had at 4 different levels. And I know we've even talked about his hiccup in AAA. I think that hiccup is still coming with like a 35% strikeout rate. Granted, it's like two
Yeah.
starts, he's walking guys, but like he's still missing bats. And that was the big knock on Matthews coming out of college, where he was this polished, like pitchability pitcher, and now all of a sudden he's like a 30% strikeout rate guy in the minors, which is huge. He's leading the entire minor league baseball in strikeouts. So I think when you look at the combination that he has of stuff and command and the depth of his arsenal, and even like the deception that he comes with like his left-handed motion, like there's so much to love from Quinn Matthews, and he has not really struggled at any level this year. I know we've talked about the him AAA, it's 2 starts. Like he has pretty much seamlessly adapted to every level of minor league hitter, and you typically will see hitters with good but not great stuff start to struggle in like double A, triple A, and he literally breezed right through double A.
Yeah.
Like I think Matthews is a guy who's super exciting. I would not be shocked if he came into camp next year and didn't win a job, but basically they told him you're like the 6th or 7th starter. Like the moment somebody gets hurt, you come up. Like I think there's a chance the Cardinals are willing to rush him that much. And considering how well he's adapted, I wouldn't blame them for it. But it depends on where the season's at next year.
I just had this
100%.
nightmare flashback when you said that about they're going to turn him into a reliever, aren't they? Which they would never do. They would never do. But I'll just sort of some stats to kind of make your point. His hiccup comes at 2 starts in AAA when he's reached the 133 inning mark on the season. I wouldn't be too terribly upset if they shut him down here soon. I mean, that's a lot of innings for a first year player, especially when there's stressful innings coming in AAA. So
Yeah, and I'll point out with that too, like I think that's affected him a little bit. His slider velocity has actually improved over the course of the season, which has made it better, but the shape of his fastball is worse in AAA than it was in single A. And I think some of that is due to the wear and tear of getting up to like 130, 140 innings when he hasn't done that before.
yeah,
So I think this is a really good chance for him to get his feet wet with throwing that many innings, and then potentially if he can get himself to like the 140 to 160 range next year between AAA and the majors, he'll be fine.
yeah, yeah. Now I'm getting bogged down in yeah. So 2 4 inning outings. I wonder if they're going to start limiting his innings because his 2 outings in AAA 4 inning outings. I could see them walking him down a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So next up, Adam, all you've got is Siani Scott. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's just Siani Scott. It's all over you. So this is from Huey RVA. Adam's last question. What is the correct resolution of the Siani versus Scott battle for center field in 2025? So in next year, you kind of already talked a little bit about it, but what would you actually do with these two, and how would you run the outfield next year?
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about it earlier where I can understand to a degree the logic why they would be playing Siani, although I disagree with the decision at the end, at base value. Um, the correct resolution, I would say, because they're basically both fourth outfielders, is I would go Victor Scott. I feel like at the end of the day, he was a top 100 prospect at the beginning of the season, and I disagree with the ranking, and I'm not sure how they got that, but he is someone who we did see a swing change throughout the season. He got better as the season progressed. We saw Brian Ludwig work with him at Memphis, and we saw him starting to really knock the crap out of the ball like late July onwards, especially like I mentioned with that swing change. And he's someone that we know, like Blake mentioned, is probably going to have a higher upside, at least offensively. We know what we're getting with Michael Ciani. We know that Victor Scott probably won't be an offensive stud either. But I would probably go with a guy like Victor Scott, right? He's probably going to be, a better offensive player. But I can also see them totally running out Ciani and just making that decision. I feel like neither one of them is going to get traded, given the fact that they're both, valuable players in some facet or another with 5 or 6 years of team control. They're both going to be kept. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, right? They're both fourth outfielders with not a ton of offensive upside, at least what we're seeing right now. Maybe Victor Scott turns it around and is somewhat maybe an above league average hitter, but at least right now, it probably isn't going to be the case. But regardless, you want to see, like Blake mentioned, we know what we're getting with Michael Ciani. We probably know what we're getting with Victor Scott, but at least he has a little bit more upside given the fact that his max exit velo is a lot higher. He, reaches that top end max exit velo a little bit more often than Michael Ciani does, has a higher hard hit percentage. So just given his upside, if you had to flip a coin, I would go with Victor Scott. But at the end of the day, Victor Scott. But at the end of the day, I could totally see either one of them. It may not make a huge difference given the fact that they're both under league average hitters who are elite defenders.
Yeah. Yep, we covered that topic thoroughly today. One that we haven't mentioned, Heather, you get the last one from the Duke. Is Chris Carpenter done, or will he play again next year somewhere? Maybe not with the Cardinals, but somewhere.
Chris Carpenter?
Did I say Chris? That was
easy. He's done.
I had that on my brain. It was a trivia question that came across. Yes, Matt Carpenter. Then, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it kind of depends how you want to look at this question. Is he done? I mean, he had a 99 WRC plus, which is that's 100's average. So, yeah. I mean, I think there will be a team that will issue him a contract if he wanted to play next year. Does he want to play next year? Probably, maybe. I could definitely see him playing next year. Should he? If someone's gonna give him money, yes, do it. I'll go for it, Matt Carpenter. But like, is he gonna be a league average hitter ever again? Probably not. Probably not. Probably not. Yeah. I mean, he's got 99 WRC plus, which is almost league average, but I think it's just gonna decrease from there, unless there's like what was it, a Yankees situation where they have like a short right field where he can hit home runs into left-handed home runs into right field. Yeah, right field. I'm like trying to remember how baseball works. Yeah, then maybe he has a good season, one last good season with a bunch of dingers, but otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, Chris Carpenter showed up on a trivia question this afternoon, and so I was looking at his stats and thinking about him, and I would love for Chris Carpenter. One does. Yeah, right. Love for him to come back for one more too, but that's that's probably not going to happen. Yeah. So I think that's probably it with the questions. A couple more, but the one that I was going to answer is a payroll question, but we kind of already talked about it, or at least I did. From RDF22, with payroll looking to be a big issue for many teams because of TV contracts. By the way, that's a really good point, is that the Cardinals aren't going to be the only one that are going to be making this transition. And so I think kind of this year is a good example, since the Cardinals didn't increase payroll. They cut payroll on some level, but yet actually went up in the payroll rankings because teams just simply aren't spending like they were. I think the same thing could happen again this year. The Cardinals payroll could go down, but maybe players aren't getting those big contracts that they necessarily expect. And so payroll being a big issue because of TV contracts, do you think the Cardinals would go with a youth movement? Like I said, I think we're kind of gonna see one more of these half measures kind of things where maybe Gibson comes back. They've got Fetty in place. Maybe they go out and find one free agent to either play center field or first base, or just bring Goldschmidt back and kind of hope that one more year go around will sneak them into the playoffs. So that's kind of what I expect. And then hopefully, that someone like Hintz or Matthews would step up and maybe provide some innings and support in the rotation that they didn't necessarily get this year. So some of the questions we didn't get to, I got a shout out to Dr. Howell, who had a couple really great questions for us. And J-Dog obviously did. And several of the others also asked questions that were similar to these. And so thanks again. I would say that we will try to do more of these Q&As because I know that they're popular. But yeah, we'll see what the offseason brings and see where we go from there. But I do want to thank you all for your questions and for participating in this. It's always a lot of fun. And it's great to see that you guys are not only watching and listening, but paying attention to the podcast and wanting your questions answered. So again, sorry if we didn't get to yours, but we will. So keep asking, and down the road we'll get your name up there live on the screen. So any final thoughts from you guys? The game apparently ended poorly. Gabe was texting us as he was leaving the game. I don't know if you guys were checking the text message chain, but yeah, he was at the game tonight. That's why he wasn't with us, and probably wishes he was with us instead of at the game. But that's life with the Cardinals this year. So any final thoughts from you guys?
Riot on Clark Street.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, we'll be back again around the end of the season to talk sort of season finale stuff, kind of putting a bow what in the world is that? A bow on the 2024 season. I'll try to learn how to talk now that I've gotten over my cold, and it should be a lot of fun. But for Adam and Blake, and for Heather and Gabe who couldn't be here, thanks so much for your questions, and we will see you around the side. Have a great day, Viva El Birdos.